Hi, my name's Beanland and welcome to this week's painting demonstration. We're going to take a look at a very basic but very important concept known as value. And value is just the lightness or darkness of a color. The dark accents in the painting are what attract the eye. So by carefully organizing your dark values, you can lead the eye through the picture. And a good value pattern that does lead the eye through the picture, giving the viewer a pleasant journey through the picture, is essential to a good painting. We're doing a monochromatic color scheme, and monochromatic means one color. Now the one color that I'm choosing is actually a mixture. It's a color I love the cool colors, in fact. So I particularly like a blue violet. So my dioxazine purple gives me the violet, and I add a little ultramarine blue to it, and I get that lovely blue violet. So even though it's a mixture of two, it's the one color I'm using. And the other thing in a monochromatic color scheme, even though it's one color, to tone it down, like as color recedes into the distance, it tones down. It gets, the technical word is it gets more neutralized. And to neutralize a color, you add the complement. So the complement of blue violet is cadmium orange, so I have some of that there which I will mix with this. This is a sample of the scene, the composition we're going to use today. This is one I did a while ago, and this there's really the three values plus white paper. So, I have the white paper, very important, those four sections there, this grass in front and over here, and then the whole sky's white. So that's the white. My light value are the roof and the side of the building here. That's a light value. Then a medium is actually this tree here. These trees in the back are a medium. The foreground here is a medium, and then my dark value is here. So when I look at this, I quickly zoom into this area. This is what attracts my eye because that's the greatest value. And when this value is contrasted with the white, it even is stronger and just jumps out. I'm just doing two little pictures because they're in the interest of time. Okay, so in this bottom one, I'm going to duplicate the picture that I saw. I'm going to have my darkest value here, my mid value here, and light value there. Okay, so what I want to do is start with my dark value, but because I want variety in this dark value, I just don't want a blob of black because that's too much. So I'm going to start with a light wash. This would be is a light value of that blue violet. And have it come down here. Now another thing I want to point out, in this painting, I'll primarily demonstrate it there, but even here I'm going to start out thinking, when you want a building like a tree, you want it sitting in grass, if you give it kind of an irregular bottom, it'll read like there's stuff in front of it. So I quickly do that, a light value of my color, and then into that light value, I'm just going to float a little bit of darker value, and particularly near the top, but kind of all over. I'm just going to float in that light value. And at the same time, I'm going to take a little bit of my complementary color, my cad orange, and float that in there. And you notice it's still all a light value, but now I'm getting some variety in there. I really like this little simple composition. And for me, it's about this dark, but the building flowing into the foreground. It's called linkage. So rather than having this sharp edge that I talked about, I'm actually going to flow this into my foreground. And I'm going to, this is just my preference, I'm just going to try and maintain a directional line going this way. So I'll come in here. So I want a little bit of the effect. I just want to turn this a bit more into a violet. That's it. I was getting a little blue. So I just want some flicks of kind of grass. And then I'm going to do what I always do. I'm going to take some pure water and do that along there, and actually do the pure water to drain right into there. This, remember, is going to be white, and that's very important compositionally, but I want a few little strokes of grass type things going into it. Now when I add these little darker strokes, I want to make sure I stay near my center of interest. I want the darks up here. If I put a real dark down here, it's just going to be distracting to the viewing experience, as it were. So I'm going to mix a little bit of the complementary to neutralize this blue-violet a little bit. Plus I'm adding water to lighten the value, and I just want to fill in that section down there. Put a little stroke there. Okay, so that's good for now. And I think while I've been doing that, I think this is probably getting close to being dry enough. So I'm going to come in and get a much stronger value of my blue violet. And this is, you know, it's quite a dark value. It's not the darkest yet. And one factor that's affecting it is there's water here on my palette. So when I mix the paint, even if I take pure pigment, it mixes with the water and dilutes it a little bit. Plus my paper is still wet. Okay, so I want to have a shadow kind of thing under the eaves. So I'll do that a little bit. And then I'm going to just put maybe a little bit, there's eventually going to be some windows there. And I'm just going to carry this a little bit so I'll just continue a little bit with some of these details. Okay, so I'm going to leave that. I will be coming back to that. So it's not finished. But it is already a dark value. I now want to shift over to my mid value, these trees, and I'm going to be very careful, try and be very careful to preserve that white. That's one thing. And the second thing, I'm going to try and have an irregular bottom so that it'll look like this grass sticking up here. Okay, so I'm going to take this again. This is really tending almost to a mid value already, and I'm going to kind of go over this whole tree area because the effect I want, I don't really want to see detail in this tree, in this area. I want variety, but I'm going to let color make my shapes. Now I want to, while this is still wet, I just have a second to explain. The top, this is a line of trees. I just like to use this effect of taking my brush parallel to the paper, and I'm going to end up painting with the side of it. I'll just bring this piece of paper in to show. And it takes a little bit of practice to get used to it because the amount of water on your brush will determine the effect. But I'm trying to go for a dry brush effect. Like that right there. I'm going to just zoom in on that. Okay, I've just zoomed in on this. That was one flick of this brush, and to me that is just absolutely gorgeous. I mean, there's a study in one flick of the brush. There's a study of, you know, a dead pine tree and another pine tree out in the bush. Just lovely. And I'm going to use some of that idea. Just get a little bit more pigment. And use that idea there. And particularly that effect in conjunction with a little bit of actual positive brushwork can be very effective in creating the illusion of trees. Now this is really still fairly light value, just tending into the mid value range there, but I want to punch it up a little bit. I'm aware that I don't want it to compete with that, and it's not yet. This is a lighter value, but this is going to be punched up, so I can afford to go a little bit more here. And in this, because I know this is going to be a white strip at the edge of the building, I want my strongest value in this to be right up against the house. So I'm just floating in the color and let the water do its thing. Now also I want it to recede towards the edge of the paper, and to do that, you know, I could lighten the value of the blue violet, but if I actually come in and add a little bit of the complementary, it neutralizes it and will more effectively read as if it's receding. So I'll put that over there, and I look at that and I think that's okay. And I like there's variety in this. It's a mid value, but in some sections a bit lighter, some sections a bit darker, but overall it reads as kind of a mid value. I'm just going to come over here and add a bit more of that. That's really strong there. Yeah. You maybe can see there's a different quality to the dark that's there to there, and that's because there's a bit of that orange in there. In any case, it's going to give me some variety and really set up this side of the building. Okay, the next thing I want to do is I want the light value on the roof and the side of the building, and I'm going to take the bottom, the side of the building. I'll take my blue violet, the side of the building. I'm just going to check that to make sure. Is that going to come out as a, yeah, see, that's a little questionable to me. I want it a little bit lighter because for reasons that I will explain. So I'm going to take that and do the whole side there, and just take time to make sure the bottom is irregular. So it will give the impression of sitting in grass. Also, I'm leaving that white. Now that's a light value. You know, it matches this. It's a light value, but when it dries, it will be a very boring light value. So I need to get some variety in it, while at the same time not letting it get away from being a light value. So I'll take first a slightly darker value of the blue violet, which will add a little bit of variety to it. The other thing I want to do is I want to emphasize this edge of this light value and start to actually bring in closer to a mid value there. And that's going to, because it's a high contrast with this white, it's going to draw your eye a little bit there. Okay, so I'm going to leave that